The story begins deep in the forest, where a man and a young boy cautiously make their way through dense vegetation. They spot a lone boar. Sneaking closer, the boy draws a bowstring and hands the weapon to the man. The man knocks an arrow and releases it, wounding the animal but not killing it. Following the trail of blood, they reach a dried-up lake where the trail disappears. In the center, they find only a weak fish, helplessly flopping on the dry ground. Disappointed, they return to the forest. On a narrow road, they come across two abandoned cars. Searching them in hopes of finding supplies, the man discovers cigarette butts, while the boy finds a pack of biscuits, which he eats alone. However, noticing the man approaching in the mirror, he accidentally bumps the car horn, sending a loud sound echoing through the area and attracting predators. A pack of wild, starving dogs rushes to the noise. The hunters quickly take cover inside one of the cars, staying silent while the dogs search the area for prey. After a while, the pack leaves, and the two continue their journey until they reach a hidden cabin concealed beneath branches. Inside, they find a sick girl lying on a bed with an inflamed wound on her stomach. The man carefully filters water using a homemade device, managing to collect only a couple of cups. He gives one to the girl along with the only pill from their scarce supplies. Later, the man steps onto the porch, silently smoking a hand-rolled cigarette made from the found butts. Early in the morning, the boy wakes up first and heads to a makeshift toilet in the forest. Suddenly, he notices a group of unknown people wandering between the trees. Panicking, he runs back to the cabin, where he camouflages the entrance and watches the strangers through a gap. The man realizes they've been found and starts packing their belongings. Grabbing the girl, they escape through a hidden exit just as the strangers break into the cabin. In their haste, they lose a bag of supplies. The man leads the boy and the girl to a pit, where he hides them before heading off to distract the intruders. A fight breaks out. He manages to wound one of the attackers, but outnumbered, he takes several blows, including a knife wound. The leader delivers a fatal strike. The bandits take the man's body, preparing it to be transported along with their other spoils. The leader notices the camouflaged toilet and approaches it to check. He tries to lift the lid, but the boy and the girl hiding inside hold it down with all their strength. Failing to open it and sniffing the air suspiciously, he eventually gives up and leaves with his group. Returning to the cabin, the boy spots the biscuit wrapper from the previous day. He realizes that the cannibals tracked them down because of it. After putting the girl to sleep, he notices that her wound has started to fester badly, and the last remaining pills were taken by the leader. Seeing her worsening condition, the boy wrestles with the thought of ending her suffering, but cannot bring himself to do it. Instead, he prepares for a dangerous journey. Taking a photo of his deceased father as a keepsake, he sets out, following the bloody trail to retrieve the medicine. The boy trudges through the desolate, post-apocalyptic landscape, shivering from the cold. Eventually, exhausted, he collapses on the riverbank. Lying on the ground, he notices a small boy who cautiously backs away and disappears. Quietly following him, the boy reaches an old house where the child lives with his grandfather. Kicking the door open, he terrifies the occupants. He takes their few belongings, pants, shoes, and the old man's jacket. Leaving the shelter, he once again finds traces of blood, leading him to a still warm campfire. Among the embers, he finds charred bones. Fighting off the wave of horror, he covers them with earth, realizing the truth he wished he didn't know. Then he climbs a tree to survey the surroundings. In the distance, he spots smoke rising from another cannibal camp. Suddenly, his foot slips, and he crashes to the ground, hitting himself hard. From the forest, the barking of dogs echoes, attracting the attention of the cannibals resting by the fire. Despite the pain, the boy crawls back to the smoldering ashes, trying to reignite the embers to fend off the predators. Throughout the night, he barely manages to keep the animals at bay, and by morning, he resumes his journey. Unexpectedly, he stumbles upon an old camping tent. Approaching cautiously, he finds a backpack inside filled with useful supplies, matches, a small folding knife, and a whistle. However, his search is interrupted by the sound of a snapping twig behind the tent. He turns around and sees the same small boy, who once again runs away. Continuing his journey, the boy follows a stream, its water turning crimson. Soon he spots a female cannibal washing knives upstream. Armed with a rock, he quietly trails her as she returns to the camp. Waiting for her to leave, he sneaks inside, carefully stepping over a signal rope with a bell. He begins searching through the belongings for medicine. At the last moment, he catches the reflection of the camp's owner sneaking up on him with an axe. The boy dodges the first strike. The woman continues attacking, but he grabs the rock and delivers several powerful blows. Struggling to catch his breath, he climbs into the house, determined to find medicine. Seeing the cannibals returning through the window, he quickly covers his tracks, hides the bloodied rock in his bag, and drags the woman's body out of the camp. On the way, he drops her axe, leaving a clue for any pursuers. Hiding behind a tree, he watches as the gang captures another victim, the same boy who had been following him earlier. He sees the leader give the injured prisoner some pills before locking the rest away in a chest. The leader then heads to the stream to search for the missing woman, while the other cannibals begin preparing their captive for their gruesome plans. However, their intentions shift when one of them notices the axe on the ground. Realizing an outsider has infiltrated their camp, the gang starts combing the forest. The boy waits behind the tree until they pass, then camouflages the woman's corpse with dry grass. Taking advantage of the reduced number of cannibals, he sneaks back into the camp. Along the way, he peers into a pit filled with human remains and barely suppresses his gag reflex. When the wounded cannibal retreats into the house to rest, the boy crawls toward the captive to cut his bonds using the stolen knife. But the terrified prisoner's cries draw attention, and the injured man stumbles out just as the boy makes his escape. Seizing the distraction, he rushes to the chest containing the medicine. However, it is locked, and his attempts to break it open fail. When the gang returns and discovers the escaped prisoner, the furious leader punishes the wounded cannibal with a blow from a stick. Soon after, they find the woman's corpse, and the leader notices dirt on the chest, indicating recent tampering. Later that evening, the cannibals hold a funeral pyre for their fallen comrade, refusing to eat her due to some twisted moral principles. That night, while hiding under a trailer, the boy spots the key to the chest hanging around the leader's neck. Remembering the matches he found earlier, he decides to act. Silently sneaking into the house where the cannibals are sleeping, he lights a match to navigate through the bodies. Carefully, he approaches the leader, slices the key's cord with his knife, and slips out without making a sound. Outside, he unlocks the chest and begins searching through a bag of medicine for the right drug. Before leaving, he accidentally brushes against the signal rope, and the sound immediately awakens the entire gang. The pursuers give chase as the boy runs for his life. The cannibals are right behind him, but the wounded one stumbles and collapses from exhaustion. Enraged, the leader kicks him to the ground and then steps on his neck, leaving him to die. The remaining cannibals continue the pursuit. One nearly catches up, but the boy twists out of reach and escapes again. He sprints until he reaches the edge of a cliff and tumbles down into the ravine below. The cannibals refuse to jump after him and instead opt to use their bows, but they miss. As they carefully climb down, the boy scrambles up the opposite slope and gains a significant lead. Exhausted, he finally reaches the house of the boy and his grandfather. However, a horrifying sight awaits him. The door has been smashed in, and inside, the old man's mutilated body lies on the floor. Deep gashes cover him, likely inflicted by either cannibals or wild dogs. Shocked and consumed by guilt, the boy steps outside, only to be ambushed by the cannibals. One of them strikes him hard on the back of the head, knocking him unconscious. Bound hand and foot, he regains consciousness at the cannibals' campsite. A fire is already crackling, and they are preparing for their feast. Struggling to free himself, he notices a folding knife lying nearby and begins inching toward it. However, the leader spots his movements and kicks the knife out of reach. Smirking, he pulls out the boy's father's photograph, the one he had been carrying for days, and burns it right in front of him, seizing an opportunity while the gang sharpens their knives and momentarily ignores him. The boy crawls toward the whistle that had fallen from his backpack. With great effort, he removes the gag from his mouth and clamps down on the whistle with his lips. A piercing sound cuts through the forest. Furious, the leader rushes over and delivers a brutal kick to the boy's ribs. But it is too late. The noise has already attracted a pack of wild dogs. Hearing the barking, the cannibals panic and flee, abandoning their captive. Once they disappear, the boy reaches for the knife, cuts himself free, and hides under a fallen log. The pack, fixated on chasing the fleeing cannibals, pays no attention to him. When the area is clear, he gathers scattered supplies, including the much-needed medicine. As one of the fleeing cannibals stumbles and sprains her ankle, the limping leader, who is trailing behind, catches up to her. Without hesitation, he pulls out a knife and stabs her in the leg. The leader steps away, his expression unreadable as the inevitable unfolds behind him. The rest of the gang continues chasing the boy. During the chase, the boy trips over a tree root and falls. Realizing he needs a plan, he leaves his jacket on the ground as bait. One of the pursuers sneaks closer, ready to attack, only to walk into an ambush. The boy leaps from above and a brief but intense struggle ensues. The cannibal gains the upper hand, attempting to strangle him. At that moment, a second pursuer, the lost archer, approaches, ready to assist. But this is exactly what the boy was waiting for. He strikes first, delivering a fatal stab to his attacker, then quickly switches into his clothes to deceive the archer. Taking the bow, the boy spots the leader and shoots him in the leg. The bowstring snaps from the force of the shot. The leader collapses, but despite his wound, struggles to his feet, preparing for a final confrontation. Hearing the barking of dogs, the boy turns and runs, leaving his crippled enemy to be torn apart by the predators. The leader tries to follow, but his injury prevents him from getting far. Wandering in search of a safe shelter, the boy stumbles upon a bullet, then emerges onto a well-maintained house. On the porch, he notices a decayed corpse clutching a revolver. He takes the weapon and steps inside, finding a tidy home. Among the belongings, he discovers an assault rifle and ammunition. But more importantly, the house has a functioning water supply with drinkable water and canned food, an invaluable treasure in these conditions. As he stocks up on supplies, he hears a noise. The leader, barely alive, enters the house. The guy suddenly grabs the rifle and aims it at him, but the weapon misfires. The leader lunges into hand-to-hand combat, knocking him to the ground. The guy pushes him off, but the enemy pounces on him again, trying to strangle him. In a desperate move, the young man digs his fingers into the leader's wound, forcing him to loosen his grip. He reaches for the shelf, grabs a revolver, and pulls the trigger. Everything ends with a single shot. Gathering the remaining supplies, he returns to the boy's home, leaving a few cans of food at the entrance, just in case he comes back. When he finally reaches the cabin, he is met by an empty, wide-open door. Realizing that he went through all of this for nothing, he slowly sits on the ground, lowering his head in exhaustion. At that moment, a girl approaches him and gently places her hand on his shoulder. On this mysterious note, the film ends.